Hello everyone and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're down into section 15 where we're going to be taking a look at reviewing and printing options. And in this first module, module 1, we're going to be taking a look at using the Thesaurus. Now, if you've never used a thesaurus in Word before, what it basically does is it will look up synonyms for any word that you've selected. So what I mean by that is if we select this word here, customize, and we'll just highlight it, and I'm going to right click, and you can see we have an option in the right click menu for synonyms. And it's really just an alternative word that means the same thing. So you can see here for the word customize, we have modified, tailored, adapted, made to order, personalized. And we could select any one of these from the list. Or we could jump down to the bottom, which says Thesaurus, which is going to open up the side pane. And this gives us a little bit more detail on each of those options. And we can select any of these from the list to replace our word customized. So if I take a look at this one here, maybe tailored, and click that drop down, I have a choice of inserting it or copying it. So I could say insert, and that word will be replaced by the new word. I'm actually just going to undo that because I want to put customize back, and I'm going to close down my thesaurus. That's pretty much all there is to the thesaurus. So what I also want to discuss in this module is spelling and grammar. So I've just got another version of the same document, and you can see that some of the things in this document are underlined with a red squiggly line. So that is how we know that we have some spelling errors, or what Word thinks are spelling errors in this document. Now, we've seen in previous modules how you can right-click on any of these words and it will provide you with any alternatives. Now, this one's a name, and names are a bit hard for Word to deal with because it's not really sure what that name should be. But if you take a word like customize here, which is spelled slightly incorrectly, I can right-click and it will give me the correct version. So again, I could just select from the right-click menu just to change that word. However, if I had completed my entire document and I wanted to do just a spell check on the entire document, I can go up to the Review tab and I have a Spelling and Grammar button just here. And again, it's going to pop this pane at the side and it's going to run through the document. So I can see here the first one it's found a misspelling of the word the, which is correct, so I could select it from the drop-down list of options. But I can also see that I've got the word twice there, which it hasn't picked up. So I might have to go in there and just delete that double word. I can then click resume and it will find the next one. So you can see that I've spelt the word strive wrong. Again, I can click it. So I'm going to click strive just to replace that word. Now it's jumped down to a surname. Now with the surname, again, I've got some more suggestions in here, and certainly if one of those is correct, you can use it. However, what I might do here is if this surname is actually correct, it's just that Word doesn't recognize it, I could choose to ignore the surname, so ignore once. Another thing that I quite like to do, particularly with surnames, is I could right-click and say add to dictionary. So it's going to add that word into the dictionary so that it doesn't prompt as a spelling error next time because Word doesn't recognize it. So a lot of the time I'll do this with people's names. I might do this with company names or even place names that Word doesn't recognize, so it doesn't register as a spelling error next time. Now I've still got a couple more in here, so let me do resume. And you can see in this paragraph here, it's picked up that these words should be hyphenated. So I'm going to say, okay, that's good. And now it's jumped back up to a name. And this name occurs twice on this page. So instead of just ignoring once, I could say ignore all. And there we go. Spelling and grammar check is complete. So that is how you utilize the thesaurus, and also how you can do a spelling and grammar check on your document once you've completed it. That's about it for this module. We're going to move on to talking about comments, so I'll see you over there. Hello again and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're down in section 15 and we're about to begin module 2 where we're going to talk all about comments. Now you can add all kinds of comments to a document, and the main reason you might want to use comments would be for collaboration purposes. So if you decide to share your document with maybe another colleague or maybe a team or another office of people, you might want to make some notes on your document that everyone can see and also that they can reply to, so you can really work together on a particular document. And comments are a super simple thing to add, so let me just show you how they work. Now I'm in my document here, and it might be that I want to add some kind of comment related to this paragraph here, the description of our firm. So the first thing you need to do is really just highlight the piece of text that you want to add the comment to. Now I've chosen just to do the title, but you could select the entire paragraph if you wanted to. And I'm going to go up to the Insert ribbon, and you'll see there is a comments group. So I'm just going to click this big comment button. And what you'll see is that it will pop out to the right hand side a little comment window, and your cursor will be flashing there just under your name. So that name is essentially the author name of the document, which in this case is essentially me. It will also timestamp it, so it currently says a few seconds ago, and I can just type my comment. So I might want to say something like, this paragraph needs more detail. Please review. Something along those lines. So now anybody that I share this document with is going to be able to see that comment, and if they want to, they can also click the reply button underneath, and if they've fixed it or they've got some more comments to add, they can add those into there. So it's a really good way of just being able to have a little conversation about a document and get issues resolved. Now, once an issue is resolved and you want to remove the comment, you can click on this Resolve button, which we will do in a moment. I just want to show you a couple of other things related to comments. When it comes to things like editing your comment or deleting it, you can find another comment section on the Review ribbon up here, and you can see you have a big pane that says Comments. So we can also add another new comment from here, so that's the same as what we did from the Insert ribbon. I have my Delete button. And from here I can choose to delete just the specific comment that I'm clicked on, or I can delete all comments in the document. I can jump to the previous comment or the next one, and I can choose to either show or hide comments. So if I click this button here, it's going to hide that comment. Now you can still see that there's a comment in this document because I've got this little comment box in the margin, and when I hover over it, you can see it also highlights that title. And I can just click to see that comment in a little pop-out window. So that's another way that you can quickly view your comments. And if I want to show all the comments down the side of the document again, I just need to click Show Comments, and they'll come back like so. So a really easy way to add comments to your document. Let me just briefly show you this Resolve button now that we've finished. So maybe a few people have replied to this comment and we've got the issue resolved. So I can now click on Resolve. And that comment is now kind of grayed out, so you can see that it's no longer really an active comment. So you can now see that that comment is essentially resolved. It's still there at the side, so you can see what the previous comment was, but it's not actually an active comment that needs action. That's pretty much all there is to comments. It's really, really simple. In the next module, we're going to start exploring some of the options you have with regards to page setup, so please join me for that. Hello again everyone, and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're down in section 15 and we're into module 3, where we're going to be talking about all of our page setup options. Now, some of these we have briefly looked at in previous modules, but I just want to go through them all just to make sure you're completely comfortable when it comes to your page setup. Now, you'll find your page setup options underneath that layout ribbon at the top. And it's this first group here where you can see it says page setup at the bottom, and then we have all of these different options. Now the first option we have here is margins, and this is actually one that we have looked at previously. If you remember, margins are the amount of space that we have down either side of our page, and also at the top and at the bottom as well. And there are actually 6 margins in every single document. So top and bottom, left and right, and also header and footer. Now, before we get into all the options that we have for margins, I just want to show you a really quick way of just being able to adjust your margin size. If you look over on the left-hand side at your ruler, you'll see it's kind of split into two parts, and you have a little grey area at the top, followed by a white area, which takes up most of the ruler. Now, this little dividing line between where it goes from grey to white, if you hover your mouse over it, you'll see you get a double-headed arrow, and it says top margin. So what I can do, if I want to adjust that top margin, is I can just click and I can either drag up or I can drag down just to move that margin around. So that's a really, really nice, quick way of being able to do that. You can do the same with these side margins by utilizing the ruler again. So I'm just hovering over my right margin until I get that double-headed arrow, and I can drag in and I can drag out. So that's really nice and easy, but it's not particularly very precise when it comes to setting your margins. You might want to make sure that you have exactly the same amount of space down either side. And that is where you would utilize your margins drop down in the page setup group. So you can see here we have a few preset margin sizes. So I could select normal, I could go for narrow, which is going to make it really narrow. I could go for moderate. I have a wide option, and you'll see each of those makes quite a dramatic change. I'm just going to set mine back to normal, and I want to bring your attention to this custom margins option that we have at the bottom. Now, this screen should look reasonably familiar. We have been in here before. This is where you can get really granular with the size of your margins. So if none of those presets suit you, you can come in here and you can manually change or manually set the width of all of your margins yourself just by entering in the numbers or using the little scroll wheels to move through. And you'll see as I change those, the preview at the bottom shows you what those margins are going to look like. Now, underneath that, we have an orientation option, and you can see my page is currently in portrait, but I could switch it to landscape view if I wanted to. I then have a pages option. So if I click that drop down, I have some different options in here. So if I select something like mirror margins, what that will do is it will say if the left side has 2 inches on the left and 1 inch on the right, the other side will basically have the exact opposite. So there's a few different options that you have in there depending on what it is that you're doing. I'm just going to set mine back to portrait. And you can also choose how you want to apply these margins, whether it's to the whole document or from this point forward. Now, if you select from this point forward, that's really going to depend on where you're clicked in your document, and those changes will take effect from that point onwards. So let's just click on OK. So that's your margins option. Orientation we've already looked at, but again, from this drop down, you still have those same two options, portrait or landscape. You have a paper size option. Now, if you're in the US, this top one here is probably going to be your default, where it says letter, so that's 8.5 inches by 11. If you're in the UK, our default paper size generally tends to be A4, so you might want to set it to that, and that will provide you with the correct margins for the paper that you use. If you can't see the paper that you use in there, you do have an option for more paper sizes at the bottom, and you can go in and you can select your paper size from here and also select the paper source, so which tray this particular paper is loaded into. So really these page setup options are all with the view to printing your document, and that's what this is here. It's asking for the paper source. Where is that paper located? Now you might be wondering why we have to specify a paper source. Well, it might be that you have two different sizes of paper in two different trays in your printer. It might be that the first page of your document needs to print on one specific size and the rest of your document on a completely different paper size. And you see this quite a lot in the legal industry. They'll have a piece of glossy paper printing out first, and then they'll have what they call continuous paper, which might just be like regular A4 or letter paper. So that's where you can go in and select your paper source. We then have our columns option. We've looked at this before if you want to divide your page into different columns. Breaks, we've also seen this before. If we need to insert some page breaks, we can do that from there. We haven't looked at this option before. This is line numbers. Now, I've got it set to none, but what I could do is select continuous, and it's going to give me numbers next to each of my lines. So that might be useful in some of the documents that you have. If you need to refer to a specific line, you might say, okay, look at the text on line 20, and that's very easily identified by whoever's looking at this document. I'm going to switch it back to none. And then again, we have this hyphenation, which I briefly mentioned right at the beginning of this course. And this is related to how words wrap when they hit the side of the margin. So I don't have any hyphenation turned on. So that means that if we are in the middle of a word, when the line wraps onto the next line, it's not going to hyphenate that word. And that's in general how I like to have that set. So those are all the options that you have in the page setup group on the layout ribbon. Remember, you can click that little arrow in the corner, which will take you back into that box. And a lot of the options in here are pretty much the same. You do have a few more advanced options or additional options in here, which are definitely worth checking out prior to printing your document. And speaking of printing, that's what we're going to move on to next. So please join me in the next module for that. Hi everyone, this is Deb and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're down to Module 4 in Section 15. We've so far prepared our document and now we are ready to print it. Now, when it comes to printing your document, you'll probably notice that there isn't any kind of print button in your ribbons. And that's because print is actually hidden in that backstage area, which we can access by clicking on the File tab. And in our menu on the left-hand side, you can see here we have an option for print. And this is where we would go to set our printer, and we can also adjust some of our printing settings from here as well. So let's jump down and take a look at this settings group first of all. This first one here is where we tell Word exactly what we want to print. So by default, that will always be set to print all of the pages. So I have a 5-page document here. So currently, if I was to print this, it's going to print out all 5 pages. Now, the next option down is print selection. So it says just what you selected. Now, currently this option for me is grayed out, and that is because when I came into print, I haven't got anything selected in my document. If I've got the first 2 paragraphs selected or highlighted, when I came into here, I would be able to print just the paragraphs that I've got selected essentially. I could then choose to print just this current page, so sometimes that's a bit useful. If you print out quite a long document and then you find that there's a mistake on maybe 1 or 2 of the pages, you can just come back in and you can just print the current page that you're clicked on as opposed to reprinting the entire document. So that's really good in terms of paper wastage. And then we also have this custom print option here. And if I select that, you'll see I get a little blank box underneath where I can physically type in the pages that I want to print. And there is kind of a specific format when it comes to that. And you can see as I hover over, it says type page numbers and or page ranges separated by commas, counting from the start of the document or the section. So for example, if I decided that I wanted to print pages 1 and 3, I could say 1, 3. That would only print page 1 and page 3. If I wanted to print 1, 2, and 3, I could do a range. So I could say 1, 2, 3, like that. Okay, so that is how you can get very specific about what pages you are printing. I can then choose how many sides I want to print on. So again, I currently have print on one side of the paper selected, but I could choose to print on both sides, and you can see a little image there as to how that's going to print. So you can see it says flip pages on the long edge. So if you can imagine that you're reading a document and you're turning those pages, that's how it's going to print. I could also choose to print on both sides, but as if we were flipping the pages on the short edge. So that would be more if I was flipping the pages up. You want all of the text to appear printed correctly so that you can read. You would select that option. And I also have an option to manually print on both sides. So this will allow me to reload the paper when prompted to print the second side. So that might be something which you may use on occasion. I then have a collation option down here, which is going to tell me how these pages are going to come out of the printer, either collated or uncollated. So if I select to print 10 copies of this document, do I want it to print 1 to 10 first of all, as in collated, or do I want it to print 10 page 1s first, then 10 page 2s, so on and so forth? Again, in general, I tend to go with collated, but that's entirely up to you. I then have another area where I can come to change the orientation of my page. So I could go for landscape if I wanted to. I can select my paper size. So a lot of these are some of the options that we saw in that page setup group in the previous module. I can once again choose to set my margins from here. And I can also say how many pages I want per sheet. So again, currently I have 1 page per sheet printing, so pretty much as you see in the preview. But I could say 2 pages per sheet, or maybe even 4 pages per sheet. It really depends how you want your printout to look. And then finally, if I want to get into some more advanced settings, I can click on that page setup button at the bottom, and that will jump me back into that dialog box that we were looking at previously, which has a few additional page setup options. So those are the settings that you have. Let's move to the top of this screen now. We have a printer area, and this is pretty much what it says on the tin. It will allow you to select whichever printer you want to print to. Now remember, obviously you need to make sure that you are connected to your local printer before it will appear in this list. Right at the bottom of this preview window, underneath the preview, you can see we can scroll through our pages. So I've got page 3 there, 4, 5, and I can scroll back through. And I also have on the right hand side a zoom slide bar, so I can zoom in and I can zoom out to get a better look at that document. Now once I'm happy with all of those options, the final step here is to send this off to the printer. And that is this big button right at the top, the one that says print, and we can just simply select how many copies we would like to print. So those are your printer options. That is the end of this section. All that's left for us to do is a quick practice exercise before we move on to section 16, where we're going to talk about some other features that you'll find in Word. So please join me for that. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our course on Word 2019. We're now down into our section 15 practice exercise, where I'd like you to practice all of the skills you've learned in this section in relation to reviewing and printing your documents. So the first thing I'd like you to do for me is to open the file called Module 15 Practice, and I'd like you to run the spell check to make sure that you've changed all spelling and grammatical errors. I'd like you to change the margins on the left and right to 0.25 inches. And in the page setup options, change the bottom margin to 0.5 inches. I then want you to preview the document just to make sure that everything looks correct. I then want you to check to make sure that all of the options in the print window are set correctly, and I'd like you to print the document, provided you have a printer attached. I then want you to save and close the file. Well, that's it. Congratulations, you're all done with the practice exercises. We're going to move on now to our last section in the course, so please join me for that.